Hi, this is Catherine, and this is Taking Tea with Catherine, and this is another installation of Tea and Mystery. And I'm drinking a very mysterious blend. It is the Murder on the Orient Express blend from Harney and Sons. It's getting a little older because it came out during that film with all those famous characters that I haven't actually watched, but I still wanted the tea, so I got the tea. I think they might be still making it, but I'm not really sure. It has a number of teas blended within. So it's got black tea, oolong tea, jasmine tea, bergamot oil, and contains natural flavor, which is always a fun little mystery in itself. It tastes mostly like a smoky Earl Grey, and when I got that tea, I was buying a few different blends that all turned out to be smoky Earl Greys. So it was a little weird, but actually, they're all good. So onward. I don't know why this particular blend was made. I guess there's something about the flavor that invokes train travel and by steam. I don't know. So I have been reading a number of mysteries this month. I'm in the middle of two other ones that I haven't finished yet. Obviously, if I'm in the middle of it, I haven't finished it yet. But I'm not going to include them in this time because I didn't finish them and they don't kind of match. I use this mug today because it has Freddie Mercury, and sometimes when I'm talking about Queen or Queens, I like to show him because I don't know. I don't think I have any other mugs that have Queens of England or whatever, so I can't use that. I don't think. But the two queens of Golden Age detective fiction. Well, if I'm going to name one, everybody's going to say it right away without even talking about Murder on the Orient Express. You know, everybody remembers Agatha Christie. Even if you barely know anything, if you barely read a book and you've barely even looked at a mystery in your life, you might have heard of Agatha Christie. She's one of the most published, I think, after the Bible and Shakespeare, I think. She's one of the most published writers ever. And so, yeah. And then we have the other queen, not as well known, but if you're at all interested in that time period, and if you're at all a mystery book fan, you have probably heard of Dorothy L. Sayers. And so this is one of the books that I read and completed this month, Whose Body? And then the other one, I don't think it's a surprise, is Murder on the Orient Express. I haven't finished this whole book yet because Curtin is in here, but that's the last one of Poirot, and I'm going to just put this one away for a while, which is probably good because it's kind of heavy. Both very good books, different stories altogether, but interesting detectives. What do they have in common? Well, both of them live in London for the most part, at least during the years of this present time period of writing. Okay, they have that in common. They don't have much else in common. I mean, they know people in Scotland Yard. They know a lot of, they're very intelligent. They could solve a lot of mysteries. They're not actually part of the police force. So I guess that's what they have in common. I don't know. The other thing they may have in common is World War One, because they're both very much affected. But I mean, who wasn't during the time? So I'll explain that a little bit later. But Murder on the Orient Express is one of the most famous of Agatha Christie's career. I had heard about that one before I'd heard of pretty much any of the others, except a few Miss Marples, because I think I was watching Miss Marple in the 80s before I knew about Poirot, I think. It's a little foggy. It's been a long time. Dorothy L. Sayers, Whose Body? Lord Peter Wimsey, not as well known, but an interesting writer, interesting story. Both characters are not 100% likable, and they're a bit quirky in their own ways, but they're both brilliant, so, you kind of let certain things go. They're not hateful either. They're not dislikable per se. They both have qualities. But Whose Body is introducing Lord Peter Wimsey, but obviously, like a lot of these writers, they don't start them at the very beginning of their detecting career or interest. He, at this point, has had some experience in helping clear up a few things. So they make reference to that. But this one brings us into knowledge of Lord Peter Wimsey. So he is not in the House of Lords. It's a sort of an honorary lordship because he is the younger brother of, I think it's the Duke of Denver. He's only in here briefly. The Dowager Duchess is in a little more. She sounds like she's going to be an interesting recurring character. And his butler, Bunter, I think. Bunter. I think that's his name. Forgetting already. Let's see. I don't want to be like sitting looking down the whole time. Yes, it's Bunter. I did remember it. So, sometimes when you're the younger brother of someone with a big title and responsibility, you can get away with certain things. And, if you've been watching the news lately, there's a certain younger brother who is very much known for that right now, but I'm not going to discuss that because I have varying thoughts of opinions, and then sometimes I think I don't need to have an opinion on any of it because it's none of my business. But so we come into this story. At this point, he is living in London near Piccadilly, and he is collecting ancient books. Well, not super ancient, but like Dante era books. So he's acquiring from, I guess, an auction of some sort, a Dante, and apparently that ties in with Dorothy L. Sayers because she translated Dante for career purposes. So she had the knowledge, and so she incorporated that. So that was kind of cool. His butler, some have compared Lord Peter Wimsey to partially like a Bertie Wooster from the P.G. Wodehouse books, Jeeves and Wooster, and similar, but not exactly, because Wooster's a kind of more silly and kind of not stupid, but a little bit not very bright, whereas Wimsey kind of puts himself in that light sometimes to get information, or he'll have his butler do something in an investigative purpose while sort of portraying himself as the all long-suffering butler and, the smart one of the bunch. And even though he is quite smart and he's quite helpful and, they have a great relationship, but he's not, it's mostly kind of an act to get people to be, uncertain of what they're, of what they're up against. So the deal is, in this story, a man in the Battersea area of London finds a body in his bathroom, in the bathtub, so it makes kind of sense, right? And he's wearing a pince-nez, and that's about all he's wearing. And yes, when I was growing up and I'd see that word, singular venture, I thought it was pince-nez, okay? I did, and I'm sure most of you did too, but I have recently, a few years ago, found out that that's not how you pronounce it. So there's a couple of different police involved. There's one named Sugg, who's kind of the idiot, the one who kind of jumps to conclusions. They always have to have one of those. But then there's also a policeman named Parker who's friends with Lord Wimsey, and he's a bit more helpful. So they find this body, and no one knows who it belongs to, much less who did it, who killed this person. But then there's also a case of a missing man who kind of resembles this person. And so, but not entirely. And some of the ways that they explain that they resemble sound a little bit anti-Semitic, and so that's a little hard to read. But it wasn't violently so. It was just sort of descriptive. I don't know. I think they probably learned how to tone that down after World War II, but they weren't there yet. So there's a few people who get hauled in for questioning, under arrest, etc. People get involved. The Dowager gets involved, and obviously they figure out. Well, Peter Wimsey does figure it out, but you go through the story, and I don't want to get more into it because obviously it's a mystery. You go through the story thinking he's a little bit, I don't know what the word is, not foppish, but kind of silly, a little, whatever kind of situation, not really, kind of carefree, whatever, and affectations, using these words that you're kind of like annoying. Everything says what at the ending. It's hard to explain, but then something happens toward the ending. It sort of helps him figure out whodunit in his own way. But he has an episode of what they called in those days shell shock, but now we call it PTSD. My cat's running around. And then you realize that there's a lot more to him than just this wealthy playboy type guy. You know, when I say playboy, he's not really like with the ladies that much, but you know what I mean? Just kind of just at the club smoking cigars kind of person. He's not quite like that. Although he does have, you know, the whole fine dining thing down and knowing the wines or whatever, but he's a lot deeper than that. So, you know, the way he solves it and the way it comes out is pretty interesting. I started to figure out who done it, but I didn't right away. So I'm kind of glad. I'm kind of glad that I wasn't. I've heard some people figure it out pretty quickly, but I'm glad I didn't, because sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. And with Poirot, there's a good reason why I do, is because I've seen almost all the adaptations by David Suchet. So sadly, even if I don't remember, usually it's in my subconscious. So I don't know if that takes away from my enjoyment of the reading, but I still do enjoy both of these writers. I would probably say for this one a solid 4 stars, because I really did like it, but I don't think I quite loved it. I want to read more of the whimsy detective stories, and I want to reread Gaudy Night, or at least get back into it. So I will. And both these books are also, or they can be included as classics. So I was really endeavoring to read my classics before I read anything else this month. So that's why I read these 2 first before I read anything else. So, you know, check. So now we're going to move on to the Murder on the Orient Express. There's no the in the beginning. And I've been wanting to read this forever and just finally did. I mentioned before that I was in a school play where I played the narrator as Agatha Christie, basically, and it was adapted for the subway system instead of the train, which was kind of fun. I don't remember a lot about it. I only have 1 page of the script in my collection still, which I'm surprised I have it all. But I have to say, this is one of those few times that I can really, really say I loved the book and not as much the David Suchet adaptation. Because I usually like the Suchet adaptations, even if they change stuff, but they did something in there. And it's funny because when I visited my friend in San Diego and we were talking about Murder on the Orient Express, she said she didn't like Poirot because that's the one she saw and she didn't like the way he reacted. And I said, yeah. And then I thought that was how it was in the book. And then I read the book and I said, that didn't happen. And why do they have to include that? Why do they have to dramatize it to that point? You know? But I guess they needed more drama. But just, it wasn't necessary. And David Suchet, though, I mean, I'm nothing against his performance. He's a great actor. And I watched also, I think it's on either Acorn or BritBox in the United States. He did a thing before he actually played Poirot on Murder on the Orient Express. He went on the actual Orient Express, which is not a steam train anymore, but it's a similar route from, I guess, Istanbul to, I think it was Paris or was it Calais? I don't remember now. But basically, a number of stops along the way, and I have been wanting to take that train. I love train travel more than most types of travel. I have never done it overnight, and for 2 reasons. One, I usually can't afford to take that kind of time to do so. It's just hard to take that much time, you know, getting somewhere rather than being somewhere, if that makes any sense. Also because I can't afford it financially. But the other reason is the Catherine reason, which is I hate bathrooms on trains, just like I hate bathrooms on planes. And even the bathroom on this Orient Express now isn't exactly as good as even a hotel ensuite bathroom. So I'd be willing to forgo my comfort a little bit, though, because I still want to go, but it's very expensive. So I probably won't be able to do that ever. But I am at least able to use my imagination, and I wouldn't want to be on the Orient Express during this situation because, and this is a good time of year to read it. I was reading it mostly on a day where it was snowing out in New York, and it wasn't like a blizzard, it was just a few inches, but it still worked. And he just comes back from the Middle East having solved or being involved in solving something. And so he's on his way back. He's called back to get to London as soon as possible. So someone who actually works on the train and who's a big shot helps him to get on what is surprisingly a crowded train ride, which usually isn't for some reason this time of year. But he meets all kinds of different people from, all different nationalities, mostly European and some American. And there's one guy who asks him for help. He thinks that someone's after him, but Poirot simply says to him, "I do not like your face." He doesn't say that in the adaptation, which he doesn't like this guy. Well, of course this guy ends up murdered. And as time goes on, I don't want to give away spoilers, you do find out, though, that he was kind of the kind of person, he's not likable at all. So you don't feel bad necessarily that he got killed. You don't want to feel like that about anybody, but this guy was pretty bad. But, so then Poirot has to investigate, and it's not like it's just chugging along and now they could just stop at a stop and find someone. Near, I think, what they call Yugoslavia, which now is not called that, but when I was a kid it was. So near the Yugoslavian area, the train gets stopped by a snowdrift and they have to get dug out, and it's getting to be a situation. So it's one of those kind of claustrophobic, closed in mysteries. And so they go over everybody, they have their stories, and as usual, everybody's hiding something. And the ending, most people nowadays know what happened at the end of Murder on the Orient Express, but I'm still not going to say it, because if you're that one person watching who doesn't know and I give it away, I don't want to be that person. But I will say this, if I was going to grade it on Goodreads, I'd give it 5 stars. I would probably lean a little more toward like 4.8, because it's just so much interviewing that after a while I get a little bit bored. It's not long enough to get bored, though, just taking away a tiny fraction away from 5 stars, but I still love it. The thing is, it's for Poirot, it's maybe my 3rd or 4th Poirot, and it was still probably one of my favorites. I still like the Mysterious Affair Styles a lot, but I think it's probably going to be one of my favorites. But I think I'm going to find something that I like even better. From what I remember from the adaptations, I think there's going to be more. Roger Ackroyd I liked possibly slightly more, just in its way, its manner of writing. I don't know how to explain that. But this was really still very good. Poirot is on his game, and I have to say, I normally don't say this, but if you want to enjoy the story, read this. And if you do watch the Suchet adaptation, take it with a grain of salt, because even though he's great, and his tour of the actual train ride when he did that a few years back was great, actually 10 years ago I think now, was fantastic. That's recommended, and he's a great actor, but they did something to his character on that I just didn't go for. So which one did I like better? I like this one better, but not by a far margin. Like, I have to say, they were just different stories, totally different situations. The romance of train travel is very much on here. Mysterious people in scarlet kimonos, that kind of thing. The whole international thing, the backstories, whatever, are very much intriguing. But this is just a very odd mystery identifying whose body and who done it, which I think puts me in mind of maybe The Body in the Library, the Marple mystery, a little bit, but I haven't read that in ages. So, I don't know. I have to read that again and compare, maybe. Both great, though. I have to say, I want to keep reading Sayers. I'm not rabid to read more Sayers, but I know that this year I'm probably going to read at least one more Peter Wimsey book or story. I think I have his collection of short stories, so I might do that. Not sure which of the next Agatha Christie. I think it's The Big Four or something. I'm not sure, but when I'm ready to read it, it will be in my TBRs. So that is my golden age of detection fiction coverage. Fiction. coverage today. I will probably have more because I intend to keep reading of that time period. Not just these two. There's other writers too. The Father Brown were mysteries that I bought recently were considered that time period. So fantastic. And yeah, did I mention the connection with World War One and Poirot just as a side point? Because I was trying to say they both had that in common. You may know that Poirot ended up moving to England as a kind of refugee, because as a Belgian refugee, which is a thing that inspired Agatha Christie when she was, I think, in Cornwall, and she saw the Belgian refugees. She said, okay, that's interesting. She saw a certain man and it inspired her. I think that's fantastic. So there's something in common there. So have you guys read these books? Have you guys read any more whimsy? Because I want to know if I should keep going. I think I should, but I want to know if it gets even better than this one, or if you didn't like it, tell me why. Maybe not spoilery so much. But feel free to subscribe down below. Follow my Instagram, which is just straight up taking tea with Catherine. I have that now. And that is all for today. Have a lovely tea-filled, mysterious day. Goodbye.